I'm going around the world to watch the best movies from every single country. Throughout the series, I've been watching 5 movies from every country in the world and ranking their national cinema. We've uncovered some real hidden gems and some disappointments. Today, we're journeying to China. Out of 10, today, China gets. Stay tuned to see how it ranks on our leaderboard. Welcome back, everybody, to Cinema Around the World, where today we're going to be looking at China. The 5 movies today are Dying to Survive, Let the Bullets Fly, Still Life, Suzhou River, and Judo. So a little bit of context might be a bit of an understatement for this one. Chinese cinema is pretty unique in how it's categorized. It's often grouped in terms of generation of director. These generations can be summarized as seen here. This graphic basically shows the trajectory of cinema in China, moving from the first generation in the 1930s to the 6th generation. It's the 5th and 6th generation I want to focus on particularly in this episode, as well as what's happened since this so-called 6th generation. There was a gap between the 3rd generation and the 4th generation of Chinese filmmakers, where there was a cultural revolution in China from 1966 to 1976. In this cultural revolution, creativity was suffocated and cinema production was brought to a halt. This meant that when the 4th generation of filmmakers came onto the scene, they sought to revitalize a cinematic landscape that had been dead for quite some time. This 4th generation then mentored the 5th generation, which was the first to bring with it serious international acclaim. The films were built from the political transition of the time. The 6th generation hailed from the same state-sponsored school, the Beijing Film Academy. They were seen as directly more radical than their predecessors. Despite coming from a state-sponsored school, their films were directly opposed by the state. Many banned for their subject matter or for entering international festivals without the approval of the government. Yet, here is where we leave off with these generational tags. China still hasn't had their 7th generation of directors. From the 2010s on, there seemed to be somewhat of a shift. Focus turned from director-driven productions to more genre or star-focused ones. The cinematic landscape of China was changing, and it was moving in the way globalization often does. The market was diffused, and the state-owned film production companies that seemed to monopolize the market were eroded and made way for a more diverse range of film production companies. This created a completely different focus for the film scene and almost changed the definition of a Chinese film. Today, it doesn't seem that Chinese films are a mirror for society or the echoes of the people. More so, they're created to be entertainment, to appease the masses. They're no longer so focused on individual expressionism and representing the political climate of the time. I wanted to start this section by saying this idea of a unified national cinema, it kind of crumbles when you try and apply that to China. Now, bear with me, I know that's kind of been the whole ethos of this series so far, but as I discussed earlier, Chinese cinema for so long has been so political and entrenched in the landscapes of the time. The films represent their eras in either how they rebel against the system or how they fall into it. Rather than doing what I've done in previous episodes, where I show how Chinese films represent China as a whole, I think it's much easier, much more interesting and relevant to show how they reflect their specific time periods and out of what landscape they were birthed from. To do this, I've tried to pick a fair spread of films, although trying to find any before the 5th generation is pretty difficult. So I've chosen 1 from the 5th generation in Judo. I've chosen 2 from the 6th generation in Suzhou River and Still Life, and 2 more modern Chinese films recommended by fan Wanlin Wen, these being Let the Bullets Fly and Dying to Survive. And look, I understand this is still a limited insight into a country which is so big, so vast, but it's the best I can do with the time I have. Okay, let me just shut up now and stop talking about political landscapes, and I might actually talk about some movies. How's that sound? The 5th generation is known for the epics it birthed. Its use of big, sweeping landscapes, grandiose sets, striking and dazzling color, and its melodrama with emotional, evocative performances. The films were still entrenched in the past, in the political transition they were going through, and the collective trauma of the Cultural Revolution. And these films found a way to bring its complex themes to global audiences. The movie I watched from this generation was Judo, which was the first Chinese film to be nominated for an Oscar, so I thought that was quite fitting. The 6th generation were more radical. They ditched everything epic and grandiose that their predecessors had focused on. Instead, they focused on small, gritty stories. They seemed to rebel against the system purely through the way they focused on human nature. The styles of filmmaking were almost documentary-like, which seemed like a key mark of this generation. Suzhou River does this through its handheld and POV shots, while Still Life does this with its long, lingering camera movements. Some of the 6th generation even shunned this label, the 6th generation, claiming there's no similarity between their movies only where they went to school, preferring not to be put in a box and simplified by being put in a label. And I can see the merit in this idea. All these movies are deeply individualistic and showcase the filmmaker's own expressions. However, as I've just said, there are similarities between them still, and I think the label still persists, so I'm going to use it. So what happened after the 6th generation? Why are we stuck here? Let's move on to some movies I watched after this 6th generation labeling. Dying to Survive and Let the Bullets Fly were both major financial and critical successes in China. Look, stylistically, these movies couldn't be more dissimilar, but I think they both represent a change in Chinese cinema. Both being box office successes, they feel like they were made for the big screen. Charismatic and lovable anti-heroes who anybody could connect with, and a real focus on genre and tropes. And I might sound harsh, but I'm really not saying these movies are bad. I'm saying they were made for a different reason than Chinese movies were made when they were more director-driven. The evocative art house films, which drew international acclaim, made way for bombastic blockbusters which put asses in seats. With a wider net of resources and studios backing these films, creating a more dispersed landscape and making it not so easy to group these films as they once were. I think this shift is perfectly encapsulated by the director and actor in Let the Bullets Fly, Jiang Wen, who was an art house film director who some attribute with the 6th generation. Let the Bullets Fly is absolutely not an art house film though. That's not to say my feelings on it are negative, but it just isn't that. It doesn't hold a mirror to society, and it wasn't made for festivals. The man went on to act in Rogue One, a Star Wars story, for Christ's sake. The landscape in China has changed. It's fair to say I had mixed feelings on this one, even though I did enjoy it. As I said in the context, the idea of unearthing a story in a corner of China that usually wouldn't have a story told is key to the 6th generation of filmmakers, and is particularly seen in Suzhou River, I feel. Told mostly through the perspective of a videographer and narrated by that same character, we never actually see his face. At points, our narrator honestly feels only loosely tied to the story, but it feels more a way to put the filmmaker himself and his own feelings into the story. As it is with a lot of art house films, trying to explain the plot is probably futile and pointless. The story is dreamlike and it's lucid. It follows this videographer telling the story of a delivery driver named Mada who falls in love with a girl he has to deliver named Mudu. The videographer's own relationship is mirrored through their relationship as well. I know that sounds confusing, and it is. And that's just putting it simply too, I think. It's honestly a lot more complex, the plot itself, but that's almost the point. It's very dreamlike and it's very lucid and it wants you to be a little confused. And this is juxtaposed really harshly by the actual style of filmmaking. It's gritty, it's harsh, it uses handheld and POV shots the whole time basically, with characters talking into the camera and the camera moving as they run. It almost feels like guerrilla filmmaking. Thematically, the story does have some interesting points to make about love, and I personally really enjoyed rewatching the opening scene after finishing the movie. It gives you a whole new perspective on that scene itself and thematically what the story's about. I would recommend if you really like art house film, otherwise probably steer clear. Dying to Survive is good, but it's good in a way that a lot of Hollywood films are good. It has a really engaging story. It's a ragtag group of misfits who come together to change the game, to do good against the big corporation, and you can really attach yourself to these lovable group of weirdos. And sure, that's all built on cliche. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It does all those things really well. It's genuinely emotional, it's funny, it's heartwarming. So what's the problem, right? Okay, I'll tell you the problem. Look, for all the merits that I just discussed, the movie lacks personality. Visually, it is bland, and it really does nothing special. It's purely practical. It leaves the movie feeling a bit bland and a bit dry. Thematically, despite the film being quite political and opposed to power, it still feels somewhat airbrushed, like some corporate idea of revolution. Revolution that is accessible to the masses. The story follows the owner of a health store who's going through quite a financial crisis. He learns of a drug to help leukemia that's markedly cheaper than the one currently approved by the government. He runs an illegal drug ring despite the fact that the drugs actually work, and angers the big pharmaceutical companies by being able to undercut them while still making a good margin. Initially, his motivations are purely self-centered and greed, despite the fact that people treat him like a god. Talking of cliche though, you can probably guess his arc and what he learns about greed in the end. Aww. Look, it says exactly what you expect on the topic, but did have some real world effect, which is pretty cool. Sure, it doesn't do anything to subvert your expectations, but it doesn't really have to. It's entertaining while it's on, and it's a nice easy watch. I can't pick one. I'm sorry, I refuse to do it. This week we're changing it to Picks of the Bunch, and we're gonna do Still Life, Judo, and Let the Bullets Fly. For a lot of these movies I'm about to talk about, symbolism is key. How it's woven into complex stories is oftentimes very beautiful. It creates such a nuanced picture of Chinese life. Let the Bullets Fly is anything but that though. A kick-ass Chinese western with some of the campiest action shots I've ever seen. I loved it. It's truly an enthralling ride. Honestly, there's so many moving parts at points I can't even keep up. But with scenes like this, and this, who even cares? He literally kung fu kicked the man into a drum. It's awesome and it's epic. The action scenes are just absolutely ludicrous and push the boundaries of campiness. I didn't even realize you could push it this far, but I was exclaiming at my screen. Every moment is just so exaggerated, and the dialogue is razor sharp and it's witty and it's like lightning quick like that. And it just all culminates in this manic pacing. All this isn't to say that it's just some stupid action movie though. And I actually think it's quite thought-provoking underneath all these layers of campiness. Basically, the story goes, a bandit and his crew rob a governor who's on his way to a post that he bought. They take him hostage and basically impersonate his post, as nobody knows what the governor looks like. And soon the bandit and the crew, they run this town. The way it draws parallels between the bandits, the bad guys, and the governor, the good guys, and what the difference between them really is actually interesting. One steals from the poor, while the other steals from the rich. Who's really the bad guy there? And it's all brought together by director and our lead, Jiang Wang's performance. He's suave, he's mysterious, and he's thoroughly opposed to power, but in such a fun and convincing way. Take this scene for example, where he makes sure none of the people kneel to him. He wants to be on level playing field with all the people in his town. And I won't lie, you can get lost in the chaos. There's a lot going on, and it probably needs a rewatch from me, but it's truly exhilarating, with honestly quite a lot of depth. Definitely go give this one a watch. Still Life tells the story of lost souls wandering through a town that's been set for destruction. People here are either searching for somebody or looking for work. It's a melancholic film that takes its time in feeding you information. It's also a political film, although not on the surface, which seems like a hallmark of the sixth generation of directors, like we've discussed, focusing on gritty, small stories or perseverance in the times of hardship. The film follows the destruction of a city in Fengxi to make way for the new Three Gorges Dam project. Our story follows two characters who've returned to their region to try and find their spouses who they've lost contact with a long time ago. The camera drifts, and I mean really drifts, as you can see, through each location. It often holds on a set much longer than you'd expect, with the environment almost being a character in the movie. It always shows you just a little bit more than you think you need to. The constant themes of destruction are also mirrored in the framing. Oftentimes we see the frame outlined by the rubble, showing how the lives of these people are shaped by the destruction. Nobody's here to stay. Everything in this movie is transient, and it has a really evocative way of showing this. It's one of those movies that will stick with you for a while, despite never being confronting. The final shot of the film alone has stuck with me for weeks, while never really telling you what to feel. It's just so stunning, and leaves you to come up with your own interpretation. Judo is a truly heartbreaking love story, and I even hesitate to call it a love story. Born of the fifth generation of Chinese cinema, it's about the suffocation of love under societal and cultural pressures. Honestly, I barely know where to begin with this movie. I watched it at 10 in the morning and it was a terrible start to my day. It's honestly so entrenched in symbolism, it's hard to know where to start, and it certainly takes a while to digest. It follows the story of Yang Jinshan and Judo. Judo being the wife of Yang Tianqing. I'm trying my best, I'm sorry if I'm butchering these. Yang Tianqing bought Judo to be his wife, and is the uncle of Yang Jinshan. I'll call them nephew and uncle now to make it easier for myself. The uncle treats her horrifically and tortures her for her failure to bring him a son. Judo meets his nephew, who works for the uncle, and slowly they develop a star-crossed love, and that love needs to be kept in the shadows. The most interesting thing for me in this movie is how it's highlighted through the visual language. Shots are constantly peeking into areas, camera being placed amidst the environment, almost hidden in the corner, always tucked away. We as an audience feel like we are peering in, seeing something that we shouldn't. Just as our main characters have to constantly be in hiding, so are we. And I won't spoil the end of the film, or really much of the film, because I think you should just go watch it, but the way it sows the seeds for the ending, and the way it comes thematically full circle is absolutely brilliant. I feel overall the movie is best summarized by this shot in particular. The colorful cloth blowing amongst cold, hard buildings. Color showing up in a place that wasn't built for it. An environment where it doesn't thrive. Love in the rubble. So where does it leave China in terms of our standings? Friend of the channel, Wanlin Wen, who suggested China and 2 of these movies. He's going to be very happy. China has moved straight to number 1 with an 8.0. I'll catch you guys on the next episode, and please recommend countries. You could be like Wanlin Wen and you could get your country chosen next time. Bye bye.